Well, hello, we are back with another review, and this one is of the new Criterion release of the film noir Ride the Pink Horse. Not an extremely well-known film, and this was a blind buy. I actually tried to see it before buying it, but it was not able to find any way of seeing it. I don't like to blind buy too often. I've been burnt a couple of times, and a couple of times it's worked out really well. This time somewhere in between, but we'll talk about. Let's talk about the film first. Usually I just really talk about the how the Blu-ray turned out, but I'll give a little bit of background on the film and what I thought. Okay, this is a 1947 film noir directed by Robert Montgomery, who was an actor throughout the 30s, 40s, and even 50s. And basically, he shot two film noirs back to back in 1947. He was one of the first big screen actors to transition from acting to directing well into their career, which he kind of opened the gates for other long-time actors to transition into directing. Lady in the Lake, which he did just prior to this one, the same year, was an experimental film, all shot point of view. Had some interesting moments, but ultimately I don't think it quite worked. The worst thing I think about Lady in the Lake, other than the gimmick of the way it was shot, wearing thin after about 10 minutes, was Robert Montgomery's performance, which I'm afraid to say I think is the worst part of Ride the Pink Horse. It's a very stiff performance, very hard to latch onto anything. But luckily there is a excellent supporting cast, and whenever Robert Montgomery is not on screen, the film really shines, but he is on screen for most of it. Has some great set pieces in this, including one on a merry-go-round. Merry-go-round features quite prominently in this film, but there's one in particular, merry-go-round, which is really quite stunning and quite memorable. The first half an hour, 40 minutes of the film, I was thinking, oh God, I've really blown it with this blind buy. It's not very good, but it certainly picks up at a certain point and really starts to come together and is enjoyable. I think it's definitely worth seeing. Perhaps worth checking out before you buy it. In the end, I'm quite happy with this in my collection, and I will rewatch it for certain parts, but it's not a completely successful film. I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. I'm quite a harsh rater in general. 6 out of 10 is still pretty solid. It has I think a lot of structural flaws and some acting flaws, certainly from the lead, but there is enough really interesting, good stuff in there to sort of counterbalance it up to a higher rating. It takes place, unlike a lot of the noirs that people think about, it takes place in a Mexican border town, although there's a lot of rural and smaller town noirs out there, like Touch of Evil and Out of the Past. Most people think of the big city. This one takes place in a shady little border town. Quite a sweaty little film. Now this is the artwork, which is pretty awesome. The disc, the booklet. Criterion experimenting with not just the regular booklets, a lot of more open-up ones that they've had recently, like their Tootsie one and now this one. Now the picture itself looks not quite as good as I was hoping for. It is a 2K digital restoration. It's mostly damage-free. There's a couple of lines here and there, but it's a little bit blurrier than I was expecting. It could be the original photography is like that. As I say, I've not been able to see it anywhere else to be able to tell anything more about it, but it wasn't as sharp and crisp as a lot of other films I've got on Blu-ray from the 40s. But, it certainly was a solid image. It didn't flicker at all. It didn't judder. Very stable, good in motion. Just not quite as sharp as I thought it could have been. But that could have been the limitations of the original production, who knows. The audio was clear, the dialogue was all very clear. It's just a straight monaural soundtrack. It has an audio commentary with film noir historians Elaine Silver and James Ursini, who are put a pretty knowledgeable, slightly dry presentation, but definitely worth checking out. A really good interview with Imogen Sarah Smith, author of In Lonely Places, Film Noir Beyond the City, which is a book about film noirs not set in the city, and it's a really interesting viewing. There's also a radio adaptation from 1947 featuring Robert Montgomery, Wanda Hendricks, who were in the film. Also, Wanda Hendricks is excellent in the film as the lead female, which I haven't listened to the radio adaptation. And it has the essay in the book that I showed you before, which is by writer Michael Almeida. So, interesting release from Criterion. Not one I would have thought they would have put out, but I'm quite glad they did, and given it, I'm sure, which is the best treatment it's ever seen, with some good special features, and a very interesting film. If not totally successful, certainly interesting.